This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This is Sarah, and I just want to take a moment to speak to you about this week's sponsor, Favor. Favor, Inc. is a statewide family-led nonprofit 501c3 organization that is committed to empowering families as advocates and partners in improving educational and health outcomes for our children. Favor is the Connecticut state organization of the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. Favor offers a single place for families with children who have medical, mental, emotional, and behavioral health challenges to find information, assistance, and training. To find out more about Favor, please go to favor-ct.org. We are grateful for our opportunity to work with Favor as a sponsor, and now on to the rest of the episode.
This episode is brought to you by Cognivue. Cognivue provides cognitive assessment tools to a broad range of healthcare providers for the early detection of cognitive impairment. Early detection allows patients to address modifiable risk factors sooner, potentially changing the course of cognitive decline. It also allows healthcare providers to develop a plan with the patient and caregiver so the patient can live their best life during their journey. For more information, go to www.cognivue.com. That's www.cognivue.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Chronicles. My name is Sarah, and today I have Mercedes Fernandez with me. Mercedes is the founder of Movement Geriatric Physiotherapy. She has a master's degree in kinesiology. She's a certified senior fitness instructor, and she was also the primary caregiver for her grandfather. Hello, Mercedes. How are you today?
Hello, Sarah. I am doing really well. I'm very excited and really happy and grateful to be here and excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to have you here too. Can you further introduce yourself to my audience?
Yes, absolutely. My name is Mercedes again, and I am born and raised in California and created Movement Geriatric Physiotherapy after a beautiful and arduous journey with my grandfather, taking care of him as he aged through his life and going to school, learning about, kinesiology and the human body movement, and really seeing that there's a beautiful and yet overlooked niche working with older adults. And so my whole history and purpose of my life is really just to help our beautiful elder community to stay mobile and joyous, really.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And I know you mentioned that your caregiver journey for your grandfather is kind of what inspired your life's work. Do you want to talk about how you became a caregiver for your grandfather and what that was like?
I'd love to. So essentially, I'll bring it as narrow as possible, but it's a long, beautiful story. My mother didn't have the best pregnancy with me. She was ill. She had some complications, and so when it was time for me to be born, my grandfather, which was her dad, was really there for her, and so he took over to help with the nursing, to help with changing, and so from a very, very early age, I was bonded with my grandfather. And so then he was getting older. He would pick me up from school. He got sick. And so then as like a little girl, just we were best friends. We were my second dad. And I witnessed him age. And so once I got into high school and college, learning more about science and, human body, I stepped in to help my mom and her siblings take care of my grandfather. And he moved in with us. And there was one significant event where, he had a fall, he couldn't reach a phone, he was pretty much on near death, and thankfully my mom and we were so close to him, we were concerned. We went to his apartment and we found him just in the nick of time. So once witnessing that in your teenage years and then feeling like the precipice of death was like very new for me. And in that moment was when I switched into really being his full-time caregiver, because you have this aspect of loving someone and then learning about care and learning about the human body. And so from then on, I became his caregiver until he passed away in 2017. And that was, again, beautiful but arduous journey. As you know, there's just so much you learn along the way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can relate to that story in a sense. I helped my parents and my grandmother take care of my grandfather also. My mom put an in-law apartment in before my grandfather got sick.
Mhm.
And I was taking classes to be a nurse's aide, so having that nursing experience. And around that time, my grandfather had an accident with a table saw. And I
Mm.
remember coming home from school seeing tons of police and rescue in my yard and running into the house and the police being like, okay, calm down.
Mhm.
Because usually there weren't cops or rescues at my house. Like most people, when you see that, you get worried. And my grandfather was airlifted to UMass. They helped him, and from there he started to have struggles and cognitive decline later. And me being the healthcare worker in the family and living there at home, not having my own children yet, I really had a significant role in his care too. So I can relate in a lot of aspects to your story, and also me just being close to my grandfather and him picking me up from school when I was sick and taking me to Mr. Doughboys and all the
Yeah.
things we did.
Mhm.
I had a very special relationship with him, so I can really relate to your story just on that level. And I can understand too, because that really made me want to stay in the nursing care role in long-term care. It was his care was why I didn't join the military. It was why I stayed nearby so I could be there for him. So I completely can relate to your story in a lot of ways. And I want to talk to you about balancing the primary caregiver role, because I never had that primary caregiver role with him. I was always the just kind of in the background helping. How did you manage the primary caregiver role for your grandfather and school?
That is, it's such a great question to discuss because it is so common and yet so not talked about. And I look back now, because I'm not taking care of anyone now. I've had 6, 7 years now of no caregiving humans. I have a dog, I had a senior dog, and there's care in there, but still, when you're in this caregiving role as a student, as a young adult, I graduated from college, I had to get into the workforce. I moved back from college, so I left to Los Angeles temporarily for school, and then I came back. So in that interim, my mom took over. And so, but even then, there's anxiety there too. Like, is she doing a good job? Is she, and that's like such a broad question. But even being in LA, I was managing, I was like the secondary caregiver, right? Calling the hospital, hey, please don't give them this medicine. And what are you giving them here? And I, I didn't have therapy at the time. And so I wish that if could go back managing school and caregiving at the same time, some kind of talk therapy, maybe group therapy would have been really beneficial. Something that I did hold on to was exercise. But even then we have caregiver fatigue, right? We get tired, and oftentimes we don't even realize because we're just like, I have to do it. I'm pushing. I love this person. There's so much to do. We really lose it's easy to lose ourselves. And so I can say that I didn't manage in the best way. I lost a lot of sleep. And at the time, again, I didn't really understand the benefits of sleep. I didn't understand because he was everything, right? His care was the forefront of my life. And so I can hear him get up to the bathroom. I'd run downstairs, I'd make sure he's okay. And yes, I think again, looking back, there are tools now that I can see that I lacked, and where I can help others kind of think about, okay, are you doing this, this, and this? I would say that the biggest one is, having some kind of emotional support outside of the family so that they can hear you, because the people around you are just too close and they're like, I don't want to hear it. It's all you talk about. And other aspects of health. So I'd say I'd struggled.
Yeah. And I think that that's fair. And I appreciate your honesty with that. I think a lot of times when family caregivers come on and they want to have all the solutions, but we don't always realize that we're in the space of advocacy for family caregivers because we struggle,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it's okay to admit that because it's it's what happened. But I'm glad that you came through it the way you did. Now, can we talk about kinesiology? Because I'm not even 100% sure what that is, and I worked in healthcare.
Yes, of course. Kinesiology is one of those just very unique terms. It's a tongue twister, but it's basically just the study of human body movement. And so kinesthetics, and ology is a study of. So it's a study of human body movement. The easiest way to put it together is it's a branch of physical therapy. A lot of the times, a physical therapist will study under kinesiology as their undergraduate degree and master's, and then they'll go on to do their doctorate of physical therapy. Occupational therapy falls under it as well, and fitness and personal training.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that. I mean, I kind of knew a little bit, but like not really because it's not super common, I think, in specifically in senior care. It's not something you hear a lot about. And so how how did you combine this like kinesiology in senior care? What made you realize that there was a need for this in that community?
The undergraduate program I was at was Cal State Northridge. And so that branch of kinesiology, they had a special section called Adapted Physical Activity. So it's an APA program where it's a student service learning program, which essentially is a hands-on learning program for the students who are in the kinesiology classes to work with the community. So it's kind of a role play, but it's a real people from the community who have disabilities. You can have someone with Parkinson's, stroke, spinal bifida. My first client was a cerebral palsy. A lot of seniors are there, and then it's a land and an aquatic program, and they also have a child section as well. I always gravitated to the older adults because of my grandfather, and that I would say that program really did change a big part of my perspective. I thought I wanted to work with athletes in the beginning, but when you're young, you have all these different ideas. But once I graduated from there, I knew that I had this really special, what's the word I'm looking for? Affinity for working with people with special needs, disabilities, older adults that required a lot of patience because I had a lot of patience with my grandfather. And so from there, once I got out of school, I noticed a lot of these jobs were for gyms, a lot of these jobs were for less for this special older adult population. Everything was really for the general population, people who wanted to get fit, and that's fine. We have this gym culture, and that's okay. But then I started to see, like, well, why is it that we don't focus on older adults? We have all them. They're taking a lot of medicine. They're expensive for healthcare, and yet there's no solution to actually helping them get better or feel better. So I kind of witnessed my grandfather. He had a walking routine. He'd walk 3 times a day, every day after he would eat. And that really inspired me to see, like, wow, up until he died, he was 90, he was dragging his oxygen machine around, relentlessly, like, I will walk until my final breath. And sure enough, he did. So that's kind of where, all of this came. I started in about 2014, and I've kind of done different iterations of this geriatric physiotherapy. But this is the third one where I can see just how influential it is and why we really need it. I really think that we're lacking the care, the compassion, and the dedication to really help older adults stay mobile.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I really like how you talk about how important walking is for seniors. So often, and I can say this with my experience working in long-term care and working in home care and taking care of my grandparents and seeing other seniors, the more sedentary you are, like the more stationary you are, the more you just sit there, the more
Mhm.
you watch TV, the more you're doing. Even a lot of seniors now are on cell phones and stuff like that and playing cell phone games and stuff. The more you're sitting there and the less active you are, the the faster you become immobile. And unfortunately, loss of mobility is a huge loss of freedom for
Hmm.
seniors. I don't care what, or anybody with any medical diagnosis. Even my son, I keep him as active as possible. Because I know that someday he might not want to move as much. And, what happens if he ends up needing a wheelchair or has balance issues down the line or whatever. But especially for seniors and adults, older adults, we know we need to move. We know we need to walk. We know this stuff is good for us. A lot of times long-term care facilities don't have walking clubs or walking groups and stuff like that, and they really should have like daily walking clubs. My grandmother was her healthiest when she would walk her dog with a neighbor three
Hmm.
you know 2 to 3 times a day. They'd go for walks. They'd do a morning walk, a lunchtime walk, and an afternoon, and they walked like a good half a mile. They had two little dogs, and they were seniors. They were walking together.
Hmm.
And it was great, and it was so good for her, and she was so healthy when she was doing this. And I've just seen like the more active you are, the better you are. Um, I I this is just stuff that is so important to me. What can people do to prevent losing mobility?
Yes. Well, I think I think the first one, like we just are nailing on, is walking. Something that is so simple and universal is, if you can and still have the capability and the mobility to walk, doesn't need to be outside, it doesn't need to be hiking. If you can just walk around the house back and forth in the hallway, I know it can be mundane, it can be boring. You're like, I'm stuck in the house. As long as it's safe, if you can just, at least have a baseline of walking to keep that there's so much benefit to walking. You have circulation moving up and down your legs every time that you're stepping. You're working out your heart, you have your respiratory. So again, it doesn't have to be a jog, it doesn't have to be a run, just walking. Because to your point, the moment we're sedentary, the adage in kinesiology is, if you don't use it, you lose it. And that goes for even something as simple as walking. You get tired and achy, and then you're lazy, and you're like, I just don't want to do anything. That becomes really detrimental. So aside from walking, I am a big fan of just home exercises. And there's so many things around us that we can use that we are unaware of, just to keep us moving. So a lot of the times I see with my older adult clients is that overhead reaching becomes really difficult. So getting a can from the cabinet becomes really challenging over time. What a little fun trick is you can get, water bottles or two cans, like a can of beans or a can of soup, one in each hand, and you can just start doing some range of motion exercises with that. So like lifting up and down, or side to side, crossing them in front of your chest, so they become like mini weights, essentially, maybe a pound or half a pound, depending on the level of strength and mobility this individual has. But little things like that, just so that if you're watching TV, you're still moving. You're still getting some range of motion in the shoulders. You can, kind of move side to side. So at any point, if you just notice that you're sitting there, and I'm guilty, we have Netflix now, it's so easy to just kind of plop on the couch. And so what I've been doing is, I'll stand up and I'll just kind of kick my legs, alternate my legs, and do some heel kicks or some toe raises, heel raises when I'm standing and watching TV, just so that, again, anytime, like, as long as we're moving our joints, that is at least the minimum we could be doing.
Thank you so much for that. And what would be like a barrier in a situation where somebody can't maybe do these movements, besides obvious like physical medical conditions? What would be
Mhm.
other barriers that might make it difficult?
Yes, I think the biggest one that comes to mind right now is that, depending on the living situation, the biggest barrier can be clutter. And this is common for older adults, especially those who, really like to save things. And hoarding is like a really big word, so I'm not going to say hoarding. But clutter is, it's, again, if there's a mobility impairment or some kind of chronic illness that doesn't allow the person to be as active, things pile up, and that's normal. So I would say the biggest limitation is clutter, and that's also really dangerous. So really making sure that their house is safe, whether it's a loved one listening or the child of a parent, kind of just making sure that there's clear walkways, because, if there's a lot of clutter and they're trying to walk, are they using a mobility aid? Is the mobility aid going to get caught on something and they fall? Or is the bathroom too small? Are there any handrails? So the biggest limitation is really what's the space that they're spending the most time in? And is it accessible? Are there things around them where they can't kick, or they can't reach because, there's the ceiling is too low, or there's, boxes around and they might topple if they accidentally hit it. So that, I guess it's not really a physical limitation, but that's more of an environmental limitation.
Yeah. And that's something that is preventable. I know that it's difficult sometimes to go into someone's home and start clearing it out.
Yes.
And that's not always met or received well.
Hmm.
And I know that too. But that's a big thing. And you mentioned like walkers or mobility aids getting caught on things and rugs. I
Yes.
I as someone who worked in home care and in long-term care, I hate rugs. I especially I hate rugs. It sounds awful, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen a rug get moved just a little bit and have a little bump on
Hmm.
it and somebody trip, or the walker get caught on the rug because it's not, especially if it doesn't have
Right.
like a
It's not
strip
taped.
in between, or if
Yeah.
it's a, one of those roll up rugs that you can buy at the store that's not like a carpet. I think rugs can be the most dangerous thing in the world.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes, absolutely. Especially if they're very slippery too. And bathroom rugs are really risky too. So I'm there with you. Something that actually just popped in my head, I was thinking older client of mine from a couple years ago was really brilliant. Like the the plastics on the floor for the computer chairs. So it's like like a plastic linoleum. She had it actually all over her house on top of the carpet. So she didn't have any rugs anymore, but she had a carpet. And so she put, I don't know if they was custom or not, but the whole carpet was plastic so that she can use her walker. She would use her roller walker in all the rooms of the house. And I thought, wow, that's actually really brilliant, because carpet and walkers are not friendly together.
yeah.
So just an idea.
Yeah. Oh, walkers can be great because like you need them, but they
Hmm.
can be if they're in the wrong environment, again, if the space is too small, if there is if space is too cluttered, cords is another thing I hate.
Hmm.
If they're not tucked in well, they can get caught on things and they can cause falls if you don't use them correctly. I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody with those walkers that you can they kind of like the benchy thing and you can sit on
Hmm.
them, and they
Hmm.
go to get up and they forget to lock it, or yeah, they forget
Yes.
to lock it as they go to get up, and the walker goes flying and they go flying. Oh yeah.
Oh
um
yeah.
any tips on how to prevent that?
Oh yes, this is my bread and butter. My favorite thing to do, and what I'm really passionate about is really helping people with their mobility aid, especially walkers. To your point, there are so many things that, like you said, the locks, the environment. What surface are you walking on, inside and outside? I've seen, unfortunately, people, yes, fly with their walker because they forget to lock it, or they bump into it and they topple over, and it's such a challenge because they are beneficial, but when they're not set up correctly, or they're not often given instructions, and that's not the senior's fault. So that's, it's really not anyone's fault, but I think that the healthcare industry can do a lot better. But that's my 2 cents. But again, what I'm passionate about is there are a lot of tricks and tips to improve that and optimize mobility with your mobility aid. So, my tip is, one thing I see often that really scares me is because the walker's too low, and a person will actually push the walker, and they'll end up trailing behind it. So their head is down, they're looking at the floor, and they're pushing forward because they're reaching for the walker when the walker should be a little bit more up, adjusted higher for them. And so that is just a precursor for falls, because they hit a rug and then they stop, but the body's too far behind. So then they tumble and they fall. So just making sure to see, where's the height of the walker, where the handles should be, 45 to almost 90 degrees, chest up, and keeping the feet closer to the base of the back wheels versus way, way behind. So I would, yeah, my biggest, if anyone's using a walker, just kind of keep that walker close, like a belt, almost like a magnet is close to the front bar. That's how I try to describe it the most. Um, and then pay attention to your surroundings and always lock the brakes.
Yeah. What is your opinion on the baskets and the walkers, by the way? Because I've seen those get over full where the walker will go tumbling and then they go try to
To
pick it
catch the
up.
walker. Yeah, I think there's so many. I can have a long discussion on walkers. I think it's such human nature to try to do everything, right? So we're like, I'm gonna fill this basket up and I'm gonna make it home. But it's, and it depends on the walker, right? I don't know if they're common anymore, but I've seen them in the neighborhood here. There's like a three-wheeled walker, which is like a triangle, and they're really cool. They have really big wheels, and there's a little like basket bag in the middle. It's great for shopping, but those are the most unreliable, loose, like the most slipperiest one I guess you can say. If you're a person who doesn't have good balance, reaction time, I see it often because, usually they'll walk really slow with it. But if you're not used to, reaction time is to lock the brakes, and they're shopping at CVS and putting stuff in it, that walker's gonna go because there's three wheels. The base of support is already smaller than a four-wheel walker. Four-wheel walker are a little bit more sturdy because of there's four legs, but the three-wheel walker, again, maybe it's a bit better because the center of gravity of the bag is in the middle, but one push and that walker's going, without you. So I would just, for me, I guess my opinion is be conscious of how much we're putting in. Don't overstuff it. And if it's going, try not to catch it. I mean, that's so much easier said than said than done, but I can only imagine, like, for me, it's like you go to the grocery store and you're like, I'm gonna take all the bags out as much and I don't want to come back to the car. So I imagine that maybe it's similar of like, okay, I don't want to come back to the source. I'm just gonna stuff, stuff, stuff. But where are you placing it? Like, how heavy is it, and is it worth it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And I can't even tell you how many times I have seen people fall from using their walker either inappropriately, it not being like you said, the height of the walker, if they're
Mm-hmm.
hunched over with it, and then they're complaining about back pain later, and you realize their walker's at like 2 feet,
Mm-hmm.
like where they're
Mm-hmm.
heighted, and maybe they're a 4 foot or 5 foot tall person, and their walker's like 2 feet, and it's like, well, no wonder why your back hurts, honey. Like
Exactly.
you're hunched over. Like my back would hurt too, and I'm a lot younger. I've seen so many falls injuries. I've seen people, yeah, back injuries with the walker not being correct,
Mm-hmm.
wrist injuries, just different things. So I think it's an interesting topic, and I think it's important that family caregivers advocate when their loved one is getting this type of equipment,
Mm-hmm.
and the person they care for, that they advocate for proper training on how to
Yes.
use this properly, because like you said, there's flaws in the medical field and in the healthcare field where you're given this equipment, but you're not giving instructions on how to safely and properly use it.
Yes.
Your mom needs a walker. Here's her walker. You get it. It's delivered to your house in a box. You have to assemble it, and then there's nothing from there.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do? How do you advocate in that situation?
Yes, it's so refreshing to have this conversation with you, Sarah, truly, because this has been, I think the people around me are like, can you stop talking about it? I did my master's thesis on this. I'm just like, I was so upset and so passionate. I'm still passionate about like the same exact thing. This is basically all the research is saying what you just said is that we're not given that information, and the doctors are like, that's the last thing they would need to be trained on because they have so much other things to be focused on. Physical therapy offices, not everyone gets a walker that way. So, they get it at the pharmacy, they buy it on Amazon, someone gives it to them, and they do not come with instructions. And it's so frustrating. So for me, my solution, I guess, and you know, I'm still kind of working it out, but that's where I'm at, is trying to advocate everyone. It's harder on the street, but you know, I notice them. I live in a small European community where there's actually a lot of older adults, and it's really amazing because they're out and about. They're biking, they're walking. I've seen old, maybe older than 85, 90-year-olds walking with their walkers on the cobblestones, and they're doing it. And I'm like, yes, this is amazing. But there's still maybe like 60% where their walkers are too low. And for me, I'm like, oh, I need to go talk to them. I want to, like, can I just help? You know, how can I like politely tell them, can I adjust your walker? But the best thing that I can give for anyone listening is I think it's hard because I don't even know if there's anything out there. There may be some YouTube videos on how to adjust it. And I'm not gonna like self promote, be like, yes, call me and I will do, you know, this is one of my services, which is true, but finding some kind of information, finding the instructions online, or just learning through here, through you and I, and your podcast as well, of basic kinesiology posture, basic human posture should always be upright. So if you see that your loved one is getting a walker or a cane and leaning one way or leaning forward too low, you know, it's an indication it's way too low. It's kind of like coming up from a really short chair. So I would just suggest that the handles should be, again, the elbow should be bent between 45 and 90 degrees, depending again on, is there kyphosis, right? Are they hunching forward naturally because they have osteoporosis in the neck? Or are they able to straighten their back a little bit? And it's not going to be perfect, but they should have their chin up, looking forward, holding the handles comfortably without having to look down. So keeping the walker close, bringing the handles up so they're at least the wrist and the elbow is in a straight line and there's no kinks in the wrist itself. So yeah, I think those are my two biggest tips. And then keeping the feet closer to the back legs.
Yes, and step into the walker.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Keeping, like, I always just look in the box. Your feet should always be in the box.
Yep.
If you look down, there's a box minus the where your feet are.
Yep. Step into the walker. I remember teaching people with their walkers and watching them, like you said, push the walker and they're dragging their feet behind. Like, nope, you got to step into that walker. You got to take steps in. I've seen it. I've written the incident reports.
Mm-hmm.
They fell. Why did they fall? I don't think they were using their walker properly. You know,
No.
were they using a walker? Did they have the equipment? Yeah, but they weren't using it right. I can't tell you how many times I've written that report from a fall, or or even they have the walker but it's in the way, like when they're sitting down, and so they tell their family, or the family member pushes it up against a wall so it's out of the way, but now they can't reach it anymore, so they get up to walk to the walker and fall,
and then they fall. And it's a slippery slope, right? Because you need it, and yet falls are one of the biggest things in senior care and elder care, and yet, again, it's a cyclical cycle. So how can we optimize, not only using it and adjusting a mobility aid, a walker, but how can we teach them? How can we teach those who are caring for them what they need to be looking for? I think that's where the gap really needs to be filled.
Yeah, too. I appreciate that. I appreciate having this conversation. And again, you mentioned falls being a huge problem in mobility, being sedentary, not moving, and falls go hand in hand. The less you move, the more likely you are to fall when you have to move, unfortunately. And it kind of just all plays into each other. And it's interesting. Do you have any tips on fall prevention or anything?
The clutter aspect is a big part of falls, so making sure that the environment is fall hazard free. But as far as mobility, again, walking is, I would say, like the holy grail of all movement, because you're working on balance naturally with having 2 feet 2 feet stands and then walking and proprioception and all that. But even I was just thinking when you were speaking is that something as simple, I mean, we have Amazon now. There is a million things we can order on Amazon. And for someone who gets fatigued often or gets tired and would like to sit, sits more, in between those sitting bouts, you can get resistance bands and they can just do some like, some leg exercises, or there's feet, like little cycle portable cycle pedals that they can sit and pedal while they're watching TV. Anything that's really going to strengthen or target the legs is going to be important for falls. And then again, using the water bottles or the cans to just kind of keep some strength in the arms and the shoulders, so that if they do fall, there's a little bit of strength there to break the fall. Unfortunately, I think we all know that when the fall's in motion, in any case, when that fall occurs, unfortunately, it's like we hope, we can cross our fingers it's not going to be a gnarly fall, but all falls become pretty gnarly. I think it's in any case that I say, no matter how much prevention we do, if the fall does occur and they don't hit their head, or they do, just go get checked out. One of the things I see often is, or I hear often from caregivers, well, say, like, well, they fell, but they didn't hit their head, so I'm not going to take them to the hospital. And I'm like, okay, but where else did they hurt themselves? I would push and recommend, it doesn't matter if they didn't hit their head, they might have bruised something that becomes internal bleeding. So, if you have health care, if you have health insurance, it's safer to be safe than sorry.
Yeah. No, 100% I agree with you on that, especially with seniors when they fall.
Yeah.
Especially if there's complaints of pain, obviously any swelling, any immediate bruising, anything like that. But even if not, I always advocate for getting checked.
Mm-hmm.
For seniors after a fall. There's been times where, you didn't realize till the next day that there was a fracture,
Right.
and you could have prevented a significant amount of pain. Also, sometimes the falls, they don't know exactly why they fell, and there could be some kind of medical issue,
Yeah.
like a fainting spell or a blood pressure issue, or it could be a precursor to an impending stroke, or you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean, or something like that, or a mini stroke that can cause a fall. If it's someone who doesn't usually fall and all of a sudden they're starting to fall, or they had a fall and they don't know exactly what happened, like they didn't necessarily trip over something, they just
Mm-hmm.
went down, it's a really good idea to get it checked, because it could be a sign of so many different things. It could be a sign of a urinary tract infection, it could be a
Mm-hmm.
sign of an illness, it could be a sign of a blood pressure issue, it could be a sign of a medication issue. So anyway, I could
Yeah.
I could
No, there's
I could
such
sit
good
here for
points.
3 hours and just list reasons why somebody might fall. That
Yes.
doesn't usually, but yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I think something that I've noticed, just on a personal note, with my grandfather and my grandmother on my dad's side, unfortunately, just depending on the frailty and the condition and other chronic health conditions tied to the fall, what I've seen is an older adult past 85 who is on the frailer end, maybe closer to EOL, and they fall and they hit their head. Um, I typically, and I'm not saying this because I'm not a doctor, and I hope no one takes this like to heart, but just kind of, I hope, just plant a seed a little bit. Be very careful with that. Get them checked and keep an eye on them, because typically I would say within a couple months they go downhill really fast.
Yeah.
And so head injuries are really, really, really dangerous, or really important. And unfortunately, sometimes because they're frail, they don't have the strength to stop. My grandfather fell in the middle of the night on accident. I think I wasn't actually here that night, which has been such a hard emotion, was emotional for me the most, because it felt like, okay, I wasn't here, I could have stopped it, which is not the case. Of course, that's a caregiver thing, but he slipped. I think because his blood sugar dropped. He was diabetic, and and those are so, diabetes itself is a whole nother conversation. It is such a tricky disease. Sometimes I feel like it's worse than cancer because of the havoc it wreaks on a human body in the long term. It's not like just there. It's like insidiously there over time. And so he fainted, and he hit the corner of the bed. So he gashed his forehead a little bit, and no one knew about it because he was downstairs. No one heard it. I wasn't here. And in the morning, my mom sees his forehead. Thankfully, he was able to. I think she came down and got him, and everything was okay from there. But shortly after that, he had like a light concussion. He's disoriented, and I'm not gonna say that caused him to die, but I do think it was one of the tipping points of his body. Just at that point was like, I can't recover from this, and it went downhill from that. So at any point, just get that checked out. I think that if anyone's listening, the head injuries are really scary.
Yeah. Actually, my aunt fell a couple weeks ago, and she's young and healthy. She's not even 60 yet. And she slipped on black ice and hit her head and had a concussion.
Oh,
And it really knocked her through a loop for a few days. It happened at work. She said she didn't lose consciousness, but wasn't 100% sure either. Could not figure out when I was talking to her in the hospital. I called her and she's like, I don't know why I'm all wet. She's like, the back of me is all wet. She's she's like, I don't think I peed. And I'm like, you fell on ice. I'm like, you said you landed on ice. I'm like, it's wet and snowy, like, but any age. I'm again a huge, like, any age, if you hit your head, you need to get it
hmm.
checked. But especially the older you are. And if you're not sure, get checked anyway for a head
Anyways,
injury, because you can hit your head and not remember that you hit your head.
hmm.
And that can cause a whole slew of things. But yeah, she had a pretty nasty concussion. And again, the older you are, the more devastating that can be. We've all fallen and hurt ourselves. Like, we've all fallen down. Even me. I had a nice little tumble coming up on the porch. My son was pushing backwards as I was trying to go forward, and I got my foot caught up in the stair, and that was it. But
Yeah.
it was I landed on my knees, and I was able to, like, get up and ambulate after. So you know what I mean? Like, I know I didn't hit my head or anything like that. Like, I know my upper half of my body never hit the ground. So you know what I mean? Like, it was just my knees that I landed. I remember landing on my knees being like, oh crap.
My knees.
Like, like, my knees
Yes.
are gonna hate me now. And they did for a day or two, but it was it. And again, we all, things happen. We have to get back up.
Hmm.
But get checked. I'm grateful nothing bad happened when that happened. I'm grateful that I was okay. But again, I can't tell you how many falls I've seen. I know someone who fell, hit their head, went home, went to bed thinking nothing was wrong, and passed away because they had a brain bleed. And they
Yeah.
were not old. They
Yeah.
might have been in their 50s or 40s.
Mm, yeah.
So you just never know. My favorite question to ask my guests: what is your favorite form of self-care?
Oh la la. Yes. Well, it's funny because we were talking about dog walking, and your was it your grandmother? I think that was walking her dog. For me, I would say walks, walking and walking my dog. I get out because of the dog, or the dogs. Really, I have two dogs, and so I always laugh because it's like, who's walking who, right? Am I walking the dog, or is the dog walking me? So my favorite form of self-care is my own walking routine. I think that I definitely adopted that from my grandfather. I've had dogs all my life, but I didn't learn how to walk, well, not how to walk a dog, but we have a big yard, so the dog just kind of hangs out and does its own thing. But when I had these two little pups, I really it changed my perspective. So I started walking them and I trained them, and because of that, I think it really incorporated my self routine. They actually were born the year that my grandfather passed away. So he passed away in November. They were born in January. And so after that, I really was able to, yeah, go full on with that self-care. I would take them for a walk. I'd come back, take care of my grandfather. And then after he passed away, it's therapy. It's a form of therapy. So my self-care is walking, dog walking.
I love it. I think it's great, and I think it's important. I think, again, walking is great, and walking is something you can do if you're a family caregiver with the person you care for.
Hmm.
Even if they have mobility issues, you can still walk with them a little bit. If you got to take them in a wheelchair,
Mm-hmm.
and you go and you just
Absolutely.
walk around the neighborhood and push them around, it's good for you and it's good for them. And
Yeah.
it can be a great form of self-care, and that change of scenery of looking around the neighborhood or a park or wherever, or the mall. If if
Mm-hmm.
it's if it's not the best neighborhood to walk in, and you live near a mall, go walk in a mall, even if it's an empty mall. Change
Mm-hmm.
of scenery,
Mm-hmm.
something to just a different environment can be so important. Um,
Yes,
I
absolutely.
I love that idea for self-care. I'm again huge fan of it. And my final question for you, where can my audience find you for more information?
Of course, yes. My website is mouvement.info. So it's movement with the U. So it's how you spell it in French. It's mouvement.info. And I have tons of resources on there. I have videos, I have the podcast, I have articles that I've written for Healthline and caregiving.com. So I encourage your audience to really, if you're have free time and want to learn some things, and everything's evidence based. So I have my master's degree, of course, and I just, yeah, I like went through a writing phase and I really enjoyed it. So all of my research is there, and yeah, pretty much it's just one website, no social media, just the YouTube account with all the videos and such. But I have home exercises, and if you have questions, you can chat on there with me, and book any sessions as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that information. And you're international, right? You're not just US based.
Correct. Yes, I am a California native. I'm currently in California, but I am currently living in excuse me, Belgium. I had a little bit of a pause there, but yes. So my services are all virtual, which means that I can pretty much work with anyone anywhere. So the time difference is always workable.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Mercedes, thank you so much for taking your time to chat with me today. It was really nice chatting with you. And I think this is very valuable information that gets overlooked.
Yes, I agree, Sarah. Thank you so much. And again, I agree that it's been so refreshing to have this conversation because they're like my favorite topics to talk about that a lot of people they just don't, we never touch on it. So thank you. It's been really awesome to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And with that, that will wrap up this week's episode of Caregiver Chronicles. If you found this information informative or helpful, or you know someone who could benefit from this information, please share this episode with them. Check out Mercedes's website. And if you want to support our show, you could give us a like, a share, or subscribe to our podcast. You can support us through Buy Me a Coffee. You can visit our website, Stelmach Brown Media. But really, the best way to support our show is to share it with a friend. And thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.